Welcome to the story of Bonnie Parker, a name that has become legendary in the annals of American crime. Together with Clyde Barrow, Bonnie tore through the heartland of America in the 1930s, robbing banks, evading the law, and capturing the nation's imagination. But how did Bonnie Parker, a girl from a small town in Texas, rise to infamy? And how did it all come crashing down? This is the story of Bonnie Parker's rise and fall, the Untouchable Outlaw. Before we dive into the infamous story of Bonnie and Clyde, let's rewind and meet a young Bonnie Parker, long before she became one of the most wanted criminals in America. Bonnie was born in 1910 in the small town of Rowena, Texas. She grew up in a working-class family, and by all accounts, she was a bright, ambitious girl. She loved to read, write poetry, and dream of bigger things. Bonnie was the second of 3 children, and after her father passed away when she was just 4, the family moved to a suburb of Dallas. Her mother worked hard to support the family, and Bonnie helped as much as she could. But even from a young age, Bonnie wanted more out of life. She was popular, did well in school, and had big dreams. In fact, if things had gone differently, we might remember her as a writer or a stage performer. But fate had something else in store for her. Fast forward to 1926, Bonnie is 16 years old and she marries Roy Thornton, a small-time criminal. It was a rocky relationship from the start, and Bonnie's life took a turn when Roy ended up in prison just a few years later. She never divorced him, but she would never see him again after that. Alone and restless, Bonnie's world would soon change dramatically when she met Clyde Barrow in 1930. Now, Clyde Barrow wasn't just any man. He had a magnetic pull about him, a rebellious charm that Bonnie couldn't resist. Clyde had already been in trouble with the law, petty thefts, stealing cars, things that didn't seem to worry him much. When Bonnie met Clyde, she found herself drawn into his world. But what really cemented their bond was Clyde's arrest just weeks after they met. Clyde was sent to jail, and for some, that might have been the end of the story. But not for Bonnie. She smuggled a gun into prison for Clyde, and soon enough, he escaped. That's right, Bonnie helped Clyde break out of jail. And from that moment on, the two were inseparable. Their love was reckless, wild, and dangerous, but it was real. With Clyde out of prison, the two of them hit the road, joined by a rotating cast of outlaws from Clyde's gang. They started small, robbing stores, stealing cars, but it wasn't long before they set their sights on bigger targets: banks. This was the Great Depression, and robbing banks wasn't just about money. To some, it was a way of striking back at the system. While Clyde was the experienced criminal, Bonnie wasn't just along for the ride. Contrary to some myths that paint her as simply Clyde's girlfriend, Bonnie was fully involved in the action. She drove getaway cars, scouted locations, and yes, she even shot at police when things got heated. She wasn't just a sidekick. Bonnie Parker was an outlaw in her own right. The gang became infamous. The media couldn't get enough of their exploits, and newspapers ran stories about the couple's daring heists. And Bonnie, she played right into it. Photos of her posing with guns and cigars circulated, feeding the public's fascination with this dangerous yet glamorous woman. But life on the run wasn't all fast cars and bank heists. Bonnie and Clyde were constantly being hunted by the law. They lived in stolen cars, slept in the woods, and were often only a step ahead of the authorities. It was a dangerous and exhausting way to live. In 1933, the heat really started to turn up on Bonnie and Clyde. After a raid on their hideout in Joplin, Missouri, 2 police officers were killed, and they barely escaped with their lives. By this time, they weren't just robbing banks anymore. They were involved in full-scale shootouts with law enforcement. The public fascination with the couple was starting to shift. They were no longer seen as glamorous rebels, but as cold-blooded killers. Despite the mounting pressure, Bonnie stayed by Clyde's side. But life on the run was taking a toll. Bonnie was injured in a car accident, leaving her with burns and a limp. The injuries didn't slow them down, but they were a constant reminder of how dangerous their life had become. For 2 years, Bonnie and Clyde evaded capture, but their luck was running out. In May of 1934, law enforcement set a trap for them. Texas Ranger Frank Hamer and a posse of officers tracked the couple to a remote road in Louisiana. It was the morning of May 23, 1934, and Bonnie and Clyde were driving down that desolate road, unaware that they were driving straight into an ambush. The lawmen opened fire, riddling the car with bullets. There was no chance for Bonnie or Clyde to escape. They were killed instantly in a hail of gunfire. Bonnie Parker was just 23 years old when she died, Clyde only 25. Their reign of terror was over, but their legend was just beginning. Bonnie and Clyde became symbols of rebellion, their love story immortalized in movies, songs, and books. But behind the legend, they were two young people, caught up in a violent, chaotic world of crime and passion. Bonnie Parker's rise to infamy was fast, but her fall was inevitable. The story of Bonnie Parker is a tale of love, danger, and a thirst for freedom that couldn't be quenched. From a small-town girl with big dreams to one of America's most notorious outlaws, Bonnie's story continues to fascinate us today. But what do you think? Was she a criminal mastermind or simply a woman in love? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories from history.